Don't listen to his words because his words will bewitch you. These are not the words of a human being. What is it that led Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi, the great poet, to accept Islam? What is it that led Labid ibn Rabi'a to accept Islam and to recognize the greatness of the Quran? Was it just because it was recited in a beautiful voice? Surah Al-Baqarah, as we know, is the second chapter in the Quran. And in the beginning of this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He puts forth a challenge. Allah Azza wa Jal, He tells us, وَإِن كُنتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, and if you're in doubt concerning what we have revealed upon our servant, then produce a surah, produce a chapter like this Quran. Bring a chapter similar to one of the chapters of this book and call upon your witnesses. Bring your crowd, bring your audience if you are truthful. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا فَاتَّقُوا النَّارَ الَّتِي وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ أُعِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. Allah, He says, and if you are not able to do so, and you will never be able to do so. Think about these words. These are not the words of a human being. This kind of challenge can only come from an absolute authority. Allahu Jalla wa Ala, He says, if you can't do it and you will not be able to do it, then beware of a fire which its fuel is human beings and stones. It has been prepared for those who reject this message. The Quran puts forth this challenge to produce a surah like it. Now, for all of us, we hear the beautiful recitation of the Quran and we're inspired. But it's to another level when you understand the language of the Quran. When you look at companions who used to be among the greatest poets of the society of the Prophet ﷺ. You look at, for example, the Yemeni wealthy poet Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi. He came into Mecca, and the leaders of Mecca, Quraysh, they warned him about Muhammad ﷺ, and they told him, don't listen to this man. Don't listen to his words because his words will bewitch you. And he got so concerned that he even stuffed his ears with cotton whenever he came by the Kaaba where the Prophet ﷺ was. But Tufail ibn Amr, he was a wise man. He was an intelligent man. He said, you know what, look, let me just hear what this man has to say. I'm not just going to take their word for it. He's a great poet himself. He says, if he has words of truth, I'm going to accept it. And if it's nonsense, I'm just going to reject it. So Tufail, he listened to the Prophet ﷺ. Well, he followed the Prophet ﷺ home. The Messenger of Allah, ﷺ, he recites ayat from the Book of Allah. And Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi, he accepts Islam. And he goes back to his people, and many of his people accept Islam as well. You have so many examples of this. When this challenge was put forth, the greatest poets in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they didn't try to attempt at producing a surah like one of the chapters of the Quran. Rather, what you find is that the best poets, the greatest poets of that society, they accepted Islam. Like Hassan ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu. He accepted Islam. He's one of the greatest poets of his people. He accepted Islam because he recognized the greatness of the Quran. You have another poet, Labid ibn Rabi'a. He was one of the authors of the Mu'allaqat. These are poems that are considered the gold standard of Arabian poetry during that time. And these Mu'allaqat, these poems, it said that they would hang these poems on the covering around the Kaaba. This was a big deal. In their society, poetry was their craft. This is what they mastered and perfected. Labid, he accepted Islam and he became a companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Labid radiallahu anhu, he says, Allah has replaced poetry for me with Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran. For him, he just gave up poetry. He just surrendered because you have something that's greater than what any poet can produce, any human being can produce, and that is the Quran. What is it that led Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi, the great poet, to accept Islam? What is it that led Hassan ibn Thabit to accept Islam? What is it that led Labid ibn Rabi'a to accept Islam and to recognize the greatness of the Quran? Was it just because it was recited in a beautiful voice? Of course, they heard it recited in beautiful voices, but it was the content, it was the meaning. And it's just very interesting that Surah Al-Baqarah, the same ayat that we are listening to right now, Labid ibn Rabi'a gave up his poetry just because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed ayat like what we find in Surah Al-Baqarah, the same ayat that we're listening to. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach us the language of the Quran. We ask Allah to make us among those who understand the Quran, those who appreciate it, those who are inspired by it, and those who teach it to others. Allahumma ameen.